Ave Maria Stella de Mater Alma, atque semper Virgo, felix celi porta, sumens illud Ave, Gabrielis ore, funda nos in pace, mutans eve nomen. So things are going to go a little different today. I'm going to be reading a number of news articles with the National Catholic Register, which is associated with EWTN, Eternal Word Television Network, which was founded by Mother Angelica. I generally consider them to be one of the most reputable names in Catholic news, and that's the site I'm normally reading on a regular basis. So we're going to be talking about Our Lady of Health. I'm going to just read through the article, and then I think at the end of the article I'll provide a little bit of commentary. So first article, Marian Shrine of Velankanni in India, the Lourdes of the East. That's how Pope St. John Paul II described Asia's biggest Marian shrine, dedicated to Our Lady of Health, which remains distinct in many ways. Chennai, India. Alongside the leading Marian shrines worldwide, like Lourdes in France, Fatima in Portugal, and Guadalupe in Mexico, comes the Basilica of Our Lady of Good Health at Velankanni, 200 miles south of Chennai, the capital of southern Tamil Nadu state. The biggest Marian shrine in Asia, thronged by more than 10 million pilgrims a year, is known as the Lourdes of the East, the history of which is more than 500 years old, with miraculous appearances of Mother Mary. Portuguese sailors who survived a shipwreck with what they believed was the intercession of Mary on their way from Macau to Colombo in the 18th century rebuilt the church that had been built after she had appeared to a lame boy whom she then healed according to tradition. The church had a miraculous beginning. Father John Zacharias, author of the book Velankanni Yesterday and Today, told the Register February 22nd. In the latter part of the 16th century, Our Lady is said to have appeared and indicated the spot where she wanted the chapel to be erected, said Father Zacharias, who is Chancellor of the Diocese of Thanjavur, under whose authority the shrine falls. Though there is no historical evidence about the first chapel at Velankanni, Father Zacharias noted the existence of the chapel at Velankanni is mentioned in the early 7th century by historian Paulo de Trinidade, who composed a chronicle of church events in Asia during 1630 to 1635. He refers to the church under the patronage of Our Lady of Health and cites plenty of miracles attributed to Our Lady at Velankanni. The chapel, which remained under the care of Franciscan missionaries from Portugal for centuries, is now a shrine that spreads across nearly 100 acres, including the basilica, which faces the sea and the serene beach of the Bay of Bengal. The basilica in its present form has been built in stages since 1928, with the more spacious rear side extension constructed in the mid-1970s to accommodate multilingual services. The magnificent Morning Star Cathedral, blessed in 2013, stands on the far end of the sprawling campus that also includes churches dedicated exclusively for adoration and confessions. A 60-foot-high statue of the Sacred Heart overlooks the basilica, and pathways with scenes of Stations of the Cross and the Rosary offer pilgrims an atmosphere conducive to prayer. This all makes for a uniquely bustling pilgrimage center, complete with lodging options. Shops and street vendors selling rosaries of all hues and designs do good business, along with offering specifically Velankanni Marian memorabilia. Healing remains central. The potential for a healing remains the biggest attraction to the shrine, which was appropriately acknowledged by the Vatican with the celebration of the 10th World Day of the Sick at Velankanni on February 11th, 2002. The shrine has a testimonial center that has chronicled nearly 10,000 personal acknowledgments of miraculous healings, blessings to childless couples, dream houses built, jobs granted, and lost things found. Pope John Paul II, in his message on the occasion, referred to Velankanni as the Lourdes of the East. He also recalled an earlier July 13, 1988 message in which he noted, "Today, millions of people are coming to Velankanni throughout the year to seek the intercession of Our Lady of Health, Velankanni." Besides the people of Tamil Nadu, thousands of pilgrims from across the country and outside, especially from the Catholic heartlands of Kerala, Karnataka, Goa, Mumbai, and other parts of India flock to the shrine. The September 8th Feast of the Nativity of the Blessed Virgin Mary, preceded by a novena, draws nearly 2 million pilgrims each year. The biggest weekly attraction is the Saturday evening rosary procession, with cries of Ave Maria renting the air as sick people, some in wheelchairs, are brought in seeking healing. Dozens can be seen crawling on their knees saying the rosary, the devotion that remains the crux of the pilgrimage to Velankanni. A lay group can be seen distributing free lunch for the destitute and beggars under the umbrella of Velankanni Cares at noon during a visit to the shrine a week before Christmas. We started the service during the COVID time in March 2022, when the poor were in a difficult situation. Now we are doing it every day for at least 150 people. Sometimes we have sponsors. If not, we meet the expenses ourselves, said Leon Anton Vijay, who coordinates the effort. Tonsuring heads, cutting off hair to show religious devotion, in Thanksgiving is a unique custom in Velankanni. The church runs a huge tonsuring center where dozens can get tonsuring done simultaneously at a nominal fee apart, and several private salons offer the same service. And the shrine does not only attract Christian pilgrims. A lot of pilgrims are Hindus and even Muslims. Father C. Irude Aranj, rector of the shrine, told the Register. A 2003 calendar with a Velankanni mother picture was being distributed free during a December visit to the shrine. Kathir Vel was the man behind the calendar distribution. "My business is doing very well now," the Hindu businessman who has a textile showroom told the Register on February 22nd, speaking from his base at Pondicherry, 100 miles away, highlighting the faith of even Hindus about the intercession of Mary. When the devastating 2004 tsunami struck the Tamil Nadu coast, nearly 900 people died in the vicinity of the Marian shrine, including hundreds of pilgrims. A memorial pillar has been erected over where those who perished were buried together. As reported at the time, despite the death and devastation around the shrine, water miraculously did not enter the church when Mass was in progress. Consequently, not a single person died in the church. Personal experience. I have also experienced the miraculous intervention of Velankanni Mother personally, and with the release of my book Early Christians of 21st Century at the Silver Jubilee Assembly of the Catholic Bishops' Conference of India, CCBI, by Cardinal Fernando Filoni, prefect for the Congregation of the Evangelization of Peoples, on February 11th, 2013. Cardinal Telesfore Topo, the CCBI president, had agreed to my request to release my book, which chronicles the remarkable witness of faith stemming from the deadly 2008 persecution of Christians in Kadhamal in eastern Odisha state at the assembly of 130 bishops. But 2 days beforehand, Cardinal Topo announced that the session was cancelled because Cardinal Filoni's flight was delayed, and the book release instead would occur at an earlier dinner. That was not what I wanted, with my entire family of 5 brothers scheduled to come to Velankanni for the event. So I took the first copy of the book to be touched and blessed at the main Marian statue. Seeing the book, the attendant almost refused, because normally they take only sacred items like rosaries, crosses, and Marian icons for touching on the statue. But I insisted. When I reached the conference venue after that, Cardinal Topo and Cardinal Oswald Gracias of Mumbai were awaiting Cardinal Filoni's arrival at the portico. Seeing me, Cardinal Topo told Cardinal Gracias that he had planned to release my book at dinner, but said, "That's not fair." So he said, "It will happen at the closing session of the conference." But he told me that it would be for just 2 minutes and advised you cannot speak, as Cardinal Filoni's felicitations, Pope Benedict XVI's message, and the CCBI Silver Jubilee closing program would all have to be presented in that hour time span. But when the Holy Spirit works, things go differently. After his closing remarks at the closing session, Cardinal Topo said, "Now we will have a special book release," and he proceeded to speak eloquently about the Kand Hamal witnesses and called me onto the stage. Cardinal Filoni formally released the book, and then Cardinal Topo asked me to speak. Meanwhile, Cardinal Filoni went through the book, and he too spoke highly about Kandhamal's martyrs and the book. Later, he even wanted a photo with my entire family. That is how the Velankanni mother draws millions to the shrine. Mother Mary, thank you for your intercession. Okay, so as you know, the reason why I wanted to read about this particular cathedral comes down to the fact that these are one of the things, it is something that exists in relation to my ancestors. Portuguese sailors who survived a shipwreck with what they believed was the intercession of Mary on their way from Macau to Colombo rebuilt the church. It isn't often that my ancestors show up in the historical record in a regular way. In some ways, in trying to find out more about Macau and the Portuguese Empire, it's a process of digging and looking for things. It's a very unique story because it combines events that happened to the people in India with outside help from the Portuguese in building up the church. And it is one of those stories that is maybe emblematic, I guess, of the Portuguese activities in Asia, that the Portuguese sailors were pretty constantly working with different groups of Catholic natives in India, in China, in Japan, in Indonesia, in different places to physically build the infrastructure that they would need for the faith. Now, more recently, the Vatican has approved. Vatican approves India's Sanctuary of Our Lady of Good Health ahead of Shrine's feast day. In the letter to the Bishop of Thanjavur, Cardinal Fernandez said Pope Francis extends his paternal blessing to all pilgrims ahead of the shrine's September 8th feast day. I suppose I should read the Vatican Letter first before reading this article. So from the Dicastery for the Doctrine of the Faith, issued August 1st, 2024. The Love of Mary at Velankanni, letter to Monsignor Sagayaraj Thamburaj, Bishop of Thanjavur. Your Excellency, the feast of the Sanctuary of Our Lady of Good Health in Velankanni, a devotion dating back to the 16th century, is approaching. There are beautiful traditions ascribed to the encounters that the Virgin had with poor and sick boys at this place of worship. Thus, the tenderness and closeness of Mary, whom Jesus desired to bequeath us as Mother of all, is manifested. Through her intercession, Jesus Christ often pours out his strength and restores health to the sick. For this reason, in 2002, St. John Paul II chose that place for the celebration of the World Day of the Sick. Thus, the same Virgin Mary who manifested herself at Lourdes also manifested herself in India as the Mother of Health. It is not merely a matter of bodily health, but also one that touches the soul. Contemplating the image of Mary, we can all recognize the love of Jesus Christ that can heal our sadness, our anguish, and our fears. If we pause before Mary, even in a brief moment of faith and love, her maternal gaze restores peace to us. The first account, which is ancient, is filled with rich symbolism because the boy to whom Mary showed herself offered her the milk he had brought with him for the child she was carrying in her arms. This was an expression of the generosity of those who are willing to give something to others in their own poverty. You do not need to have much in order to be generous. May this call to share, to assist, to be close to those who need us always resonate in this place. Mary loves the generosity of her children who put into action the words of Jesus. What you did for one of the least of my brothers, you did to me. Through the centuries, Mary has continued to act in this place. Some Portuguese sailors told how the Virgin protected them from a storm at sea, and thereafter they decided to build the church. How can we fail to remember the tsunami in the Indian Ocean in 2004, whose destructive waves did not damage the church? The millions of pilgrims who travel here out of faith, and the many spiritual fruits that are produced at this shrine, make us recognize the constant action of the Holy Spirit in this place. Many non-Christian pilgrims who come seeking solace echo similar experiences. Some of them are healed of their illnesses, and many find peace and hope. Without doubt, the Holy Spirit is also at work in them, responding to by Mary's intercession. This should not be considered as a form of syncretism or mixing of religions. The sanctuary is a place where the closeness of Mary, who welcomes everyone and demonstrates the love of the Lord to those who reflect on it, is manifested. Those who cannot receive the sacraments of the Catholic Church are not denied the consolation of the Mother of Jesus. Together with the Holy Father, Pope Francis, I recall the spiritual beauty of this place of faith. The Holy Father cares a lot about the popular piety of the faithful pilgrims, because they reflect the beauty of the Church on the move, which seeks Jesus in the arms of Mary and entrusts its pain and hope to the heart of his mother. For this reason, Pope Francis asked me to inform you of the great appreciation he feels for this place of faith and in preparation for the September celebrations in the sanctuary. He extends his paternal blessing to all pilgrims. Right, so Vatican approves India's sanctuary of Our Lady of Good Health ahead of Shrine's feast day. So this is August 8th, 2024. The Vatican has approved devotion at the sanctuary of Our Lady of Good Health in Velankanni, India, the site of reported apparitions of the Virgin Mary in the 16th century. 1 month before September 8th, the September 8th feast day of Our Lady of Good Health in India, the Dicastery for the Doctrine of the Faith confirmed in a letter to Bishop Saga Yaraj Thamburaj of Thanjavur that the action of God is present at this shrine. Throughout the centuries, Mary has continued to act in this place, DDF Prefect Cardinal Victor Manuel Fernandez wrote, "The millions of pilgrims who travel here out of faith and the many spiritual fruits that are produced at this shrine make us recognize the constant action of the Holy Spirit in this place." According to a Thanjavur tourism website, approximately 20 million pilgrims from India and abroad visit the shrine each year, 3 million of whom visit during the 11-day festival held August 29th to September 8th in honor of Our Lady of Good Health. Devotion to Our Lady of Good Health began in the late 16th century following 3 different oral accounts of the apparition of the Virgin Mary in Velankanni, a town in the southern India state of Tamil Nadu. The first apparition account of the Virgin Mary acknowledged by the DDF is that of a local shepherd boy who, upon seeing the beautiful woman, offered the milk he was carrying with him for the child in her arms. This was an expression of the generosity of those who are willing to give something to others in their own poverty. You do not need to have much in order to be generous. May this call to share, to assist, to be close to those who need us, always resonate in this place, the August 1st letter reads. The DDF also specifically recognized the account of Portuguese merchant sailors who landed safely in Velankanni after a violent storm at sea on September 8, 1650. That day, which was also the feast of the Nativity of Mary, the sailors vowed to build a church in thanksgiving to Our Lady of Good Health. More than 300 years after the construction of the original church, St. John the 13th raised the Marian shrine to the... Okay, so this should be St. Pope John the 13th raised the Marian shrine to the status of basilica on November 3rd, 1962. In 2002, Pope John Paul II celebrated the annual World Day of the Sick at the Sanctuary of Our Lady of Good Health. In the letter to the Bishop of Thanjavur, Cardinal Fernandez said Pope Francis extends his paternal blessing to all pilgrims ahead of the shrine's September 8th feast day. The Holy Father cares a lot about the popular piety of the faithful pilgrims because they reflect the beauty of the Church on the move, which seeks Jesus in the arms of Mary and entrusts its pain and hope to the heart of his mother, Cardinal Fernandez wrote. So I have seen... So it is interesting. So this gives us a date here. The account of the Portuguese merchant sailors, so that they landed specifically on September 8th, 1650. Which is an interesting date, and it does tell us more information regarding the context of these events. So part of the reason that we're talking about this now is probably that people are looking through at various apparitions which are various Marian apparitions which are to a certain extent older and maybe, I'm not certain exactly what happened, but my guess is that in the transition from the royal patronage to the ordinary church that there's certain devotions and documents which certain documentation regarding apparitions which might only be recently coming to light. So you can see here, for example, so looking at the Catholic Encyclopedia, there's various lists on different protectorates. We have here, though, the entry for the Portuguese patronage. So the Portuguese patronage in the Far East, this refers especially to China. There was not, prior to the 19th century, any protectorate properly so called or based on a treaty. What is sometimes called the Portuguese Protectorate of Missions was only the Portuguese patronage, Padroado. This was the privilege granted by the popes to the Crown of Portugal of designating candidates for the sees and ecclesiastical beneficiaries in the vast kingdoms acquired through the expeditions of its navigators and captains in Africa and the East Indies. This concession, which brought to the King of Portugal a certain portion of the ecclesiastical revenues of his kingdom, carried the condition that he should send good missionaries to his new subjects, and that he should provide with a fitting endowment such dioceses, parishes, and religious establishments as should be established in his acquired territories. At first, Portugal's zeal and generosity for the spread of Christianity corresponded to the liberality of the sovereign pontiffs manifested in the grant of the Padroado. But in the course of time, this patronage became the source of most unpleasant annoyances to the Holy See, and one of the chief obstacles to the progress of the missions. The main cause of this regrettable change was the failure of Portugal to observe the conditions agreed upon at the time of the bestowal of the privilege. Another reason was the disagreement between Portugal and the Holy See with regard to the extent of the patronage, for while Rome maintained that it had never granted the privilege except for really conquered countries, Lisbon claimed the right for all the countries designated by the famous demarcation of Pope Alexander VI as future possessions of Portugal. In virtue of this interpretation, the Portuguese government violently contested the papal right to appoint, without its consent, missionary bishops or vicars apostolic in countries which were never subject to its dominion, such as the greater part of India, Tonkin, Cochin China, Siam, and especially China. In the vast Chinese Empire, where Portugal had never possessed more than Macau, the popes consented to end the strife by a sort of compromise. Besides the See of Macau, they created in the two chief cities, Peking and Nanking, bishoprics in the appointment of the King of Portugal, to which were assigned 5 of the Chinese provinces. The other provinces were left to the vicars apostolic named personally by the Pope. This system lasted from 1696 to 1856, when Pope Pius IX suppressed the titles to the sees of Peking and Nanking. Thenceforth, all the Christian settlements of China were administered only by vicars apostolic. Passing over the quarrels regarding the Padroado, we must confess that the missions of the East owe much to the munificence of the kings of Portugal, although these were never accepted by the infidel sovereigns as the official protectors of the missionaries, much less of the native Christians. Portugal strove to play this honorable role in China, especially by dispatching formal emissaries to Peking during the 18th century, for besides their ostensible instructions, the ambassadors received orders to intervene as much as possible in behalf of the missionaries and native Christians who were then being cruelly persecuted in the provinces. The first of these embassies, 1727, almost had a disastrous ending when the Portuguese envoy Dom Metelo de Souza petitioned the Emperor Yongqing to recognize the liberty of Christian preaching. The second, 1753, avoid a similar danger by maintaining silence on this critical point. It is only just to add that these embassies, having flattered Chinese vanity, produced for the mission a measure of respite from or moderation of the persecution. Later, by expelling the Jesuits and other religious societies which had established for it such successful missions, Portugal excluded itself from subsequently occupying any position in a sphere in which it had earlier been foremost, and by its own act destroyed the basis of its patronage and its protectorate, such as it was. It is worth noting that during the glory days of the Portuguese Empire in Asia, the foremost religious order chosen by the Portuguese kings was the Jesuit order. It was a decision that began with St. Francis Xavier, one of the original founding members of the Jesuits, and it was a decision that continued with such great men as Alessandro Valignano and Matteo Ricci. So looking at the map of southern India, we can get an idea of where Velankanni exists in relation to other locations in southern India and then also Sri Lanka. Velankanni is about 100 miles up the coast from the Pearl Fishery Coast. Pearl Fishery Coast was visited by St. Francis Xavier of the Society of Jesus, so he would have been on that coast. He would have arrived on that coast in October 1542. Paravas. Yeah, the Paravas. Okay, and then Cape Cormoran. Cape Cormoran is the lowest cape at the very most southern point tip of India. So we can definitely say from that point onward that there was definitely a Catholic population within India that had contact with the Portuguese sailors. The second map I have here is of the route between Macau and Colombo. You'll see that here I'm using the Chinese and Portuguese spelling of Macau rather than the British spelling and Indian spelling that you see in the article. But you get an idea, though, of the route. So they must have left Macau, the sailors, and then they were coming back to Malacca. Sorry, not coming back. They must have left Portuguese Malacca, and then as they were crossing the Bay of Bengal, on the way to Colombo and Sri Lanka, very likely what happened is that they hit some sort of a monsoon wind. The monsoon winds generally blow I think even in late summer, south to north. And that would have been the sort of storm that would have pushed them up towards Velankanni. And definitely they're about maybe over 200 miles or so north of where they intended to be. I don't have the article at this time, but I do know that it is a Portuguese religious practice, particularly among sailors, to offer devotions to God and to Jesus Christ during storms when you're on the sea. And that just has to do with the fact that the Portuguese are just on the ocean so often that it does become a regular part of Portuguese sailing culture to do that. And there was various rituals around it. That is, as soon as you were safe back on dry land again, you had to make good on all the promises that you made during the moments of trouble when you were on the sea. All in all, though, the route is not, it's not exactly a short route. We're talking about distances here of over, over 3,000 miles, but then again, it isn't exactly, it isn't exactly a, you don't do the whole thing at once. I think realistically, the sailors probably would have put in at various places along the route in order to take on fresh water, fresh food. With regard to the date of when the article said that the Portuguese arrived at Velankanni, 1650 is an interesting date. It is a moment in time which would be just after the end of the Iberian Union, when the Portuguese were fighting their War of Independence against the Spanish. At that same time, they also would have been engaged in wars against the Republic of the Netherlands, the Dutch. Both those conflicts would have been I wouldn't say world wars, because realistically the number of combatants is small. However, they would have been the first wars in which people would have been fighting almost the entire world over. The conflict between the Portuguese and the Dutch was a conflict in which the Portuguese had to fight the Dutch in Brazil, in Africa, East Africa and West Africa, in India, in Indonesia, in Malaysia, in the Spice Islands, and various political maneuvering between the Portuguese and the Dutch, even in Japan. There really wasn't a single place, and then also the conflict. There were battles between the Portuguese and the Dutch, even in China. it really was a case where both countries went all out in terms of trying to dominate one another's colonies. Although that said, the Dutch were the aggressor, and the Dutch really were trying to carve out their own empire in Asia. And ultimately, I think they took more than half of the Portuguese colonies with them. But that would be some of the context surrounding when these events did occur. It was a very complicated time. Certainly, any look into the history of the Portuguese activities in Japan, you'll know that this was a complex time.